Hi, everybody. It's Tom Simmons and the Priest in the Hot Seat podcast. Am I safe with God? That's a question that a lot of people ask, though rarely out loud, because it's an uncomfortable question. Of course, I'm safe with God. Our theology says so. And yet, the heart doesn't necessarily accept that truth. And it's not an unusual experience or feeling to wonder if I'm safe with God, if God is judging me, if I'm alienated from God, if God is angry with me. And so I'd like to go to Isaiah, and he takes us to a very intimate place in a conversation between God and his servant. We're going back to one of the servant songs in Isaiah that introduces us to this mysterious character, God's servant. And in this conversation, God sounds really upbeat, but the servant is feeling down in the dumps. We pick up in verse 8. Here we are, we're in Isaiah 49. It's the second servant song of Isaiah. And let's pick it up here in verse 8. Thus says the Lord, through Isaiah to his servant. In a time of favor I have answered you. On the day of salvation I have helped you. I have kept you and given you as a covenant to the people, to establish the land, to apportion the desolate heritages, saying to the prisoners, come out. To those who are in darkness, show yourselves. They shall feed along the ways on the barren heights, shall be their pastures. They shall not hunger or thirst, neither scorching heat, nor wind, nor sun shall strike them down. For he who has pity on them will lead them, and by springs of water I will guide them. I will turn my mountains into a road, and my highways shall be raised up. Look, some shall come from far away, from the north and from the west, from the land of Cyrene. Sing for joy, O heavens, and exult, O earth. Break forth, O mountains, into singing. For the Lord has comforted his people. He will have compassion on his suffering ones. So all this great stuff that God is promising to do to restore his people, to repopulate the desolate heritage of the promised land, to visit, to liberate the captives, to bring home the dispossessed on a highway prepared through the wilderness for them. But then we get to the next verse in verse 14, and we see Zion interrupting. So we got this wonderful worship service going on among all creation. Exalt, O heavens, O mountains, for the Lord has comforted his people. But, verse 14, Zion said, the Lord has forsaken me. My Lord has forgotten me. All right, so Zion here is God's people, and they are feeling really down in the dumps. And, you probably know the feeling. Right? On the edge of a breakdown, or maybe deep down into your breakdown. They have, and they have good reason to say this because, you look around, the evidence of God's salvation is not visible. You think about Jerusalem at that time, the city was in ruins, the Temple Mount on Mount Zion was destroyed, and so many Israelites had been killed. And those that hadn't been killed were taken captive as slaves in Babylon. And there they've been for 70 years. It just feels a little teeny weeny, little like being forsaken, forgotten. You get that, right? I mean, you can imagine these people, and you don't have to think a lot because sometimes you feel like that yourself. Breakdown. Bottom of the barrel. I can't go any further. Sometimes it really does feel like God has forsaken me, that God has forsaken this old world of ours. He's forgotten us. I know a guy named Brian. He and I were talking about God, and Brian's like, yeah, God. He said, God and I have not seen eye to eye for many years. I used to be a God-fearing man, but that's changed. And after asking him what happened, well, it turns out that Brian's mom died of cancer when he was like 19 years old. To him, it felt like being forsaken, being forgotten. He prayed and he prayed for his mom's healing. And, well, God didn't answer the prayers. God didn't give him what he was asking for. And Israel felt like that. The Lord has forsaken me. God has forgotten me. But God makes a case here to the contrary, all right? And I want you to check out God's response to this lament. God picks it up right here in verse 15. He says, can a woman forget her nursing child? Can she show no compassion to the child of her own womb? Even a mother might forget. And God knows, well, there are a lot of sad stories out there. Even a mother might forget her nursing child, and yet I will not forget you. Folks, if you like the Priest in the Hot Seat podcast, I ask you to do two things. One, send it to a friend, because that's how these things go viral. And two is, if you have a question that you'd like me to try to answer, then put it in the comment section below. Thanks, and I'm really glad to have you here. So, God compares his love for his people to a mother's. Now, if that is not strong enough persuasion for you, and clearly it wasn't for Israel, his audience, God makes his case another way. In verse 16, he says, see, I have inscribed you on the palms of my hands. Your walls are continually before me. So that's a very interesting picture. And the first thing it says to me is, inscribed on the hands means like center of his attention, kind of like me with my smartphone. Like, that's how much attention God's giving to us as we give to our phones, all right? That's kind of cute, I know. Maybe a little sacrilegious, but the point, it does get the point across. Or think of another image. People say, I know this city like the back of my hand, which means, when somebody says that, it means he really, really knows it well, right? Like he could drive these streets blindfolded. That's how well God knows us, like the back of his hand. Or another way of looking at it is, whatever is that we are in the grip of God. We are under the protection of God. We are at the center of the affection of God. You picture a little kitten in the palm of your hand. We're like that close to his affection, his love. You with your hands, you hang on to something that's really valuable to you. Like you hang on to that. Like, you're going to have to pry it out of my cold, dead fingers. Like that's how hard you're holding on to that thing. And then God says here in verse 16, he says, your walls are continually before me, which is a curious thing to say, but it has very specific meaning to this audience. I think he's probably referring to those broken down walls of Jerusalem. He's saying to a people in exile who long to return, who don't believe they ever will return to Jerusalem. He says, I hold your walls, that city of Jerusalem, that broken down city. I hold it in my hand, and I've got plans to rebuild that city up again. You see that? Very assuring words. He's going to rebuild that city. So God's here is making a very strong case as to why Israel can trust him, even in the midst of circumstances that look hopeless, that because he speaks, because he's made promises, because he holds them in his hand, because he holds them like a mother holds her newborn infant, that there is hope, even though it doesn't look like there's any hope. But there's more here. And I want you to look a little closer here, okay? When you think of the palm of God, what comes to mind? It's kind of a trick question, all right? You see the crucifix behind me? you think of Jesus's palms with the nail prints scribed in those wrists, those palms, those hands nailed to the cross. Remember when Jesus on Easter appeared to his disciples? There's no way they could assimilate what they were seeing. They thought maybe he's a ghost, but he showed them what? His hands and his feet as proof of his resurrection, proof of his love, as proof that he will never leave them or be defeated. Jesus wears those scars eternally. That's the hand he's reaching out to you. These are hands of love. They're strong hands. They're scarred hands. Jesus has been telling them a lot of things before that time about who he is and what he's going to do, and it really didn't sink in very deeply to them, did it? But when he showed them his hands and his feet, only then did they believe. That's when it sank in to their heart. Now that is powerful evidence. It's more persuasive than mere words, isn't it? Those are the hands that welcome you. Those are the hands that heal you. Those are the hands that hold you, that protect you, that guide you through life. These are the hands that provide for you. These are the hands that are shaping you through whatever you're suffering through. And I love how this woman in the video I'm going to show you describes how God's hands sustained her through almost unimaginable suffering. Enjoy this video.
Have you ever noticed how many people in the Bible asked God, why? I mean, even Moses did. I was just reading about it this morning, that God called him to go before Pharaoh and say, let my people go. But what happened immediately after Moses obeyed? The suffering got worse. The Israelites, they were beaten harder, their burden increased, and suddenly the people began questioning Moses. They questioned God. I think they probably questioned everything. And in that moment, Moses, though, he couldn't see that the waters were going to part. He couldn't see the freedom. He couldn't see the miracle. All he could see was the pain getting heavier after obedience. And I think that's where a lot of us live. I know I have lived here, especially recently. When I had to relearn how to walk, I asked God why. When I lost multiple babies through miscarriage, I asked God why. When I couldn't see my older two children for years, oh my goodness, I asked why so many times. And when my mom died too early, I asked God why. And maybe some of you are asking God why right now too. But asking God why isn't the problem. The problem is when we stop trusting him in the middle of the asking. Because faith isn't pretending that things don't hurt. Faith is believing God is still good, even when life just doesn't make sense. Moses didn't know the waters were going to part. And it makes me think of Job. Job didn't know restoration was coming. Joseph didn't know that the pit was leading to the purpose. They only saw the chapter they were standing in. And sometimes so do we. So do I. But he is still sovereign even when the prayers go unanswered. He's still faithful in the waiting. He's still present in the suffering. And he's still God, even before the waters part. Over many, many, many years, I've come to believe that this is what trust really is. It's not understanding everything. It's believing he's still holding us, even when we're in the middle of it.
Now, if you like this episode, hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell so that you know the next time we drop a Priest in the Hot Seat episode. And help us make this thing go viral by sending it to your friends. Thanks, and God bless you.